Ready.
So I'll just jump straight into it. Maybe. So kind of just looking at year one with Jeff Ferris taking over, going 4-8. What were the expectations in that first season for him running the program?
Uh, I would say they were pretty high just because, those last couple of years with Scotty Walden before he left for UTEP, he made the FCS playoffs one year. Had a really good record over his 3 years in Clarksville. Um, so I wouldn't say the expectations were super high because most of that roster from that last year of Scotty Walden did transfer out. Um, And Jeff Harris was hired in December of 2023. And so, he was immediately hired and then kind of had to hit the December portal window hard as soon as he was hired, and then really had to hit the May portal window hard to get some guys in there. I wouldn't say the expectations were super high, but they certainly weren't what their record was last year. Like that was below the expectation, but it the expectations weren't out the roof through year one, I would say.
Well, coming into year two, how have those expectations kind of adjusted to coming into this year?
I would obviously say they're higher just because he had a full year of recruiting. They've got a lot of transfers in from some bigger FBS schools, not necessarily Power Four, but they got some guys in from uh, bigger universities at key positions that are expected to contribute. Chris Parson, he's expected, or not expected, but he's probably going to be the starting quarterback. He transferred in from Mississippi State. Um, they've got a couple receiver transfers that played at some bigger schools, had good years over there. They brought in some offensive linemen in the portal. That was probably their biggest area of need last year was the offensive line. So expectations are definitely higher um, this year compared to last year, just because Jeff Ferris had a full year of recruiting.
Are there any kind of special storylines you're looking at coming into this year?
Um, I would the whole off season, the thing with them has been learning how to finish games, according to Jeff Ferris. They had, I want to say 4 or 5 games last year where they either led at halftime or they led late in the second half and they lost the game. And those couple games were the difference in them winning 7 or 8 games compared to the 4-8 record they put up last year. They played Eastern Kentucky, and I want to say they were up, I don't remember the exact amount, but they were up over 20 points at halftime, and Eastern Kentucky came back and beat them in overtime.
Oh man.
Um, so there were multiple games toward the end of the year where they led at halftime or they led later in the game, and they just lost it. They would put up these big numbers in the first half, and then they would just go out there and put up a dud in the second half to lose the game. And so I would say that's definitely what I'll be watching if they've kind of learned how to finish those games. Because like I said, most of their schedule was filled with close games outside of like blowout losses to Louisville, um, Southern Illinois, Central Arkansas, teams like that. But those teams are really good. Um, I would have said, kind of going back to the expectations in year one, Austin Peay fans would have at least expected to beat teams like Southern Utah and West Georgia and Utah Tech and all those teams. They beat two of those teams, but I think that's definitely what I'll be watching in year two is if they've kind of learned how to, carry over momentum from the first half into the second and win some of those close games.
I know you mentioned when you were talking about the portal about the Chris Parsons coming in. Um, Austin Smith, he was a starter for majority of last year, put up numbers. Not sure if they were great numbers or anything efficient. So you expect Parsons to be the starter?
Yeah, Austin Smith wasn't even the initial starter last season, he was in a quarterback battle with Mason Garcia going into last year. Mason Garcia was the starter in the very first game of the season against Louisville. He got hurt, I want to say the second or third drive of the game, and it knocked him out for the whole season.
Oh
So
man.
Austin Smith took over about the third or fourth drive of the very first game and uh, honestly did about all he could with what he was working with. Like I said, offensive line wasn't that great. He had really good weapons on the outside and a really good running back in Lavelle Wright. Um, so he did about all he could with the weapons he had, considering the protection. But, I kind of look at it as if Austin Smith didn't beat out Mason Garcia last year, I don't think you bring in a guy from an SEC school like Mississippi State, bring him down to the FCS level, and you don't expect him to start. So I would expect Chris Parson to be the starter week one, but if something does happen to him, Austin Smith's a heck of a backup.
Yeah. So kind of building off that, what other players would you say are kind of guys to pay attention to or to watch?
Give me 1 second here. I made a list. I anticipated this question. Um, I would say Shamar Kirk. He's a wide receiver transfer from Miami. Um, then they have another guy. His name's Nate Garnett. He's a wide receiver transfer from Morehead State. Everything that I've seen and heard, those two guys are kind of expected to be the go-to weapons on offense. Then they brought in offensive line transfers from North Carolina, Princeton, Troy, and Tennessee State, just to kind of beef up that offensive line, like I mentioned earlier. And then they brought in a bunch of defensive backs from the portal. Guys like Javius Bond from East Carolina. Um, they brought in Miles Wiley from Harvard. All guys that were, good players at not necessarily Power Four schools, but bigger FBS schools. And kind of going back to that full year of recruiting that Jeff Ferris had, that was kind of key in getting some of those guys from those bigger schools out of the portal instead of having to, panic a month after you got the job and kind of get in that portal and just grab whoever was left, basically. Um, with a full year of recruiting, he kind of got his pick of, who he wanted and who he didn't want in the portal.
Well, so the last thing I've got is could you just give a score prediction for this weekend?
Um, I think MTSU wins, but I don't think it's like a 30 or 40 point blowout necessarily. If I had to put a number on it, I would probably say MTSU 35, Austin Peay 14 or 21 maybe.
All
I
right.
don't think I don't think it'll be that close necessarily as the numbers say. I think MTSU will kind of build a big lead and then Austin Peay maybe finds a way to get back in it late a little bit, put some points up, but I don't think it'll be a 30, 40 point blowout, but I think MTSU wins it pretty easily.
All right. Well, thank you, Calvin. I appreciate you taking the time, man. It was good to talk to you.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on.